Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Danger Knock podcast. I'm your host, AcroNM, and today we're going to be talking about Deadpool and Wolverine and some breaking news in the MCU that might leave it doomed? Question mark. Man, it was cringe in my head and it was cringe out loud. So I just came out of watching Deadpool and Wolverine for the second time. I'm surprised I only got it twice so far. Usually, when these heavy hitter Marvel movie comes out, or maybe just any other just heavy hitter blockbuster, I try to see it multiple times in theaters. Luckily, I'm an AMC A-lister. Just plugging that. I feel like I'm like a VIP in the moviegoer business, but I would hate to advertise for something I'm not getting paid for, but listen, if you like movies, then you should be an A-lister. Because honestly, for $20 plus, I'm not pitching this shit. This is my podcast. What the hell? All right. Anyways, back to the movie. Whoo, man, I can't even begin to get into it, but I want to avoid having recency bias, so I'll check in with myself in a couple months' time. But as far as just watching it twice, I think that Deadpool and Wolverine was phenomenal. I think that it was probably the best in the Deadpool series. It did feel a bit different than the other ones in terms of, I wouldn't even say tone, but even just look wise, it just seemed brighter, more vibrant. The storyline just was also vibrant and different in the sense that now we're implementing a bunch of new elements not previously involved in the Deadpool universe. But I'm going to try to give a spoiler free review, and then I'm going to give a spoiler full review. But either way, if you haven't watched it, you should probably go watch it first and then come here if it has not already been spoiled for you already. But I think that overall, the movie, as a biased person who, man, it's going to be hard to say this without spoilers because the whole movie is basically spoilers. Essentially, if you're a person who's a fan of Marvel, not only comics, but even just movies predating the MCU as well, you're going to thoroughly enjoy this movie because it's an homage and a catering to those fans. If you're not as well versed in kind of what's going on in Marvel movies pre and post Marvel Cinematic Universe, the beats of the movie may not hit as hard or may not resonate as well with you as an audience, and you're going to probably base it more on the cinematic quality of the film, which is fair and understandable. But I can't undo my bias as a comic book fan and as a fan of those movies that got me into comic books in the first place. So I believe that for me, it just scratched the right itches per se. And I'm saying that when I have a hell of mosquito bite. I got like 80 mosquito bites on my legs right now. And just even saying that reminded me of it. So I'm going to try to tune that out. But yeah, ultimately, spoiler free review is that it really caters to the fans. It allows Deadpool to have a more kind of narrative arc that fulfills parts of his character that kind of weren't really highlighted in the first two. It's a more internal reflecting Deadpool as opposed to what we've seen in the past. But honestly, I think that it was even more funny than the first two, which I was surprised. And I was surprised about how raunchy it got, considering that Disney now owns Deadpool and the right to those Fox characters. I thought that Disney and Kevin Feige would have made it a little more, I guess, a diluted version of Deadpool, but luckily it seemed to be the opposite. It seemed to be that they probably thought that, so they went ahead and doubled down on Deadpool being Deadpool and being very rated R. So for anybody who is into superhero movies but not into raunchiness or vulgarity, then these movies are probably not right for you, as you should probably know by now. But surprisingly, there's always some people who bring their kids to a Deadpool movie, and I'm like, you 100% should know better than that. But man, I don't. I guess they just think that it's a superhero movie, so it's open to all children, and and the theater is not, I guess, picking up on the fact that there's like a 6 year old walking into like a rated R movie with genitalia jokes every 5 seconds. But hey, I guess to each their own. And for those who came in for a rude awakening, that's your lesson learned. But anyways, back to the movie. I think I'm gonna try to just rack my brain to get into like even what happened. I saw it twice, but there's just so much that happened that I'm inevitably gonna miss or skip out on some parts. But I think the most popular portion of the movie happened in the very beginning, and now we're gonna get into spoilers. So here's our 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 spoiler alert. So leave now if you haven't seen it. Deadpool's dance number in the beginning was honestly like it's been stuck in my head. Him dancing to "Bye Bye Bye" by NSYNC. It's just so satisfying whenever Deadpool does some shit because it it subverts expectations, but also makes you feel like, oh, okay, of course, this is something Deadpool would do. Um, and I just thought it was amazing, and to introduce it in a way that addresses the fact that um, it's coming off of the heels of Logan. Or I guess I wouldn't say that, but it's picking off where Logan left off, which was him being dead and buried, and taking that and kind of establishing that this is going to be the primary concern for people that are going to have with Wolverine being in this movie at all, considering that people loved his final outing as Wolverine and Logan, and him ultimately dying and sacrificing himself in Logan, which I guess this is now spoiler alerts for Logan as well, but hey, what are you going to do? So a lot of people were concerned that Hugh Jackman's legacy as Wolverine were going to be ruined and that this is just a money grab. And I think all of these things that were kind of brought forth by fans were acknowledged in the movie and acknowledged to the point where they understood that this is what people are going to say, but that they don't really care and that they push on. And I really respected that because it prevents them from having them hinder a story for the sake of some like sweaty nerds. But that might be foreshadowing for myself, considering what I'm going to talk about later in this podcast episode, but we'll get to that. But yeah, having them kind of just go straight into Wolverine's grave and make that whole intro essentially desecrating that Wolverine's grave and using his adamantium bones as weapons was honestly a perfect kind of just like FU in a fun way that acknowledges that what they're doing is resurfacing those previous characters, but in a fun way, and to just accept the fact that it's going to be silly and goofy. So, and the dance number was crazy sick. I can't get the "Bye Bye Bye" song out of my head ever since then, and it seems to be taking off on social media, which is every studio's dream that what they create in a movie ends up taking off culturally and pop culturally with the fans, and it makes people who are previously maybe not inclined to watch it go watch it just to feel like they're in on the cultural zeitgeist of what's going on. And so I just love when comic book movies are able to transcend. I think I talked about this previously in my episode last year for Spider-Verse, that when movies that are comic book based are able to transcend just the comic book fandom and to kind of leak into the household names and trending scenes, it just makes me feel cool. Like, okay, that something from my personal kind of hobbies and interests are also being accepted by the masses. And I don't know, I just find that really cool. So the intro was amazing. All of Deadpool's movies have fun and interesting introductions. So I thought that that was great. But getting into the story, I think that, like I said before, it seemed different than a prototypical Deadpool movie based off of the first two. And it allowed for kind of, it seems like a pivotal point in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that they seem to be very kind of heavy handed with the multiverse aspect of their universe right now. And even acknowledged within the movie, they're kind of saying, like, hey, we're kind of milking it dry now. And it seems to be the case in a lot of other media, and both in almost everything comic book related. There's all seems to be at this point a multiversal theme between DC comics and DC movies. And even to Image Comics with Invincible, their season 2 is based off of multiversal aspects. And it's like, all right, you're kind of wringing it dry here and it's becoming overdone. And I like how in Deadpool they acknowledge that and went forward into continuing that aspect of the story, but in the sense that they understand what they're doing and they're going to lean into all the quirky aspects of it instead of trying to make it super serious. And having the TVA from Loki, which is essentially a multiverse corporate entity that manages the different universes within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or I guess, and beyond, was a good way to kind of have Deadpool traverse through these different environments and encounter different characters and basically just use it to serve as a big fan service movie, which as a fan, I felt like I was served. So I can understand if someone who is not as big of a fan and just wants to see a movie may feel like it was all over the place and not well thought out, which could be true in some aspects. To get into the nitty gritty of it, one part of the movie that confused me was the fact that Deadpool is going to Wolverine's grave, which was at the end of Logan. But in the Logan movies, in the Logan movie specifically, all the mutants were basically dead. And there was only, like, I guess, a few surviving mutants, him and some other like mutant kids. But if that were to be the case, that Logan was in that universe with Deadpool, but Deadpool also has Colossus and the other mutants that's hanging out at Xavier's mansion in his own universe, it doesn't, they don't overlap properly. But if there's one thing that you'd know as a not only comic book fan, but a fan of the X-Men movies in the Fox universe, that the timelines are all iffy and it all is just all over the place. So I try not to think about it too much, and it doesn't really take away from my enjoyment of the movie. Because I didn't really realize that until afterwards when I thought about it. So if that's the case, then it's fine by me. Especially with a goofy movie like Deadpool. It's not as serious. You just take the enjoyment as it comes. But yeah, I thought that was really cool how they brought Deadpool into that universe and basically acknowledged the fans every step of the way. With Deadpool actually like talking to us through the fourth wall. I feel like I'm so somber about this. Why am I like, I need to like, but my energy's off. I got to go on a road trip right after this, and I'm just trying to get this out, but we'll trudge through. Don't let my demeanor diminish the Deadpool movie. God, I'm on fire again. All right, let's go. All right. So what else do I have here in my notes? Yeah, so I think that this Deadpool movie, the vibes were more like vibrant in the sense that it brought in a lot of characters that brought in a lot of their own elements to the movie, whereas in previous movies, Deadpool was the primary driving force of the narrative and the things that were going on, within the movies. But in this movie, Deadpool is more of a observer of the things going on around him and being involved, but him kind of taking in stuff that is happening around him and implementing himself within those worlds. So yeah, I think it was great in that sense, and I I'm wondering what they're gonna do with him moving forward. Um, Considering that this seems to be like a penultimate version of what Deadpool should be. Like you, any story after this would inevitably have to be dialed back, considering how grand this story was. But yeah, we'll see. If you're gonna be introducing someone into a universe, it is expected that there will be more of him to be seen. I'm not sure if that will be in the way of his own solo movie again, but a lot of people want him to kind of have interactions with Spider-Man, the future X-Men, potentially the Fantastic Four. But I think any way they could continue to bring him and Ryan Reynolds into that role for as long as he can, I'm totally down for it. Getting into like Wolverine, man, this is the part of the reason why sometimes studios should not listen to the fans, because if they strictly listen to the fans, they would have kept Wolverine dead and would never have brought him back after Logan. But the fact that they did it in the way that they did in this movie, it really was, like I said before, fan service. And I guess that's kind of contradictory. On to bring him back is also fan service, but to bring him back is also against what the fans say. But I think it's ultimately people just feel so satisfied with how Logan ended that they felt like that was a good cap on that, on Hugh Jackman's career as Wolverine. But ultimately, for the fans, we want to see our favorite characters operate in a way that they operate in the comic books. And this was as Wolverine as Hugh Jackman has ever been in any of his movies. And down to how he moved, how he talked, and as they addressed in the movie, even how he dresses, he's finally wearing the costume. And there's a point in the movie where they address the fact that he's dressed in a way that he's not embarrassed to be in a comic book movie, which is kind of how the Fox X-Men movies operated. They seem to have a underlying, I don't know if shame is the right word, of being a comic book movie and try to distance themselves from that, even to the point where they would make jokes about wearing yellow spandex and saying that that's not what I guess a hero like them would wear. And they instead opted for black leather suits, which is, I guess, not very superhero-esque, but from what I heard, it's essentially based off of the fact that at the time when these X-Men movies were coming out was fresh off the heels of the Matrix movies and Blade being the only previously massively successful superhero movie, both involving black leather outfits. So they just kind of opted into that as a style, which, hey, like, hindsight's 2020. It'll be hard to convince them otherwise at that time that that would be successful. And ultimately, they didn't really know that brightly colored comic book accurate suits would work, because they didn't have, the only other kind of bar they could compare that to would be the Batman movies, of like the Tim Burton Batman movies and such. So I guess they just felt like that would be kind of corny. But the new Spider-Man, or not the new, but the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies kind of proved that, hey, this is what people are looking for in terms of their comic book characters being brought to the big screen. And from there, I think less and less kind of being held back in terms of, oh, a comic book movie has to be serious in the realm of other movies, when in reality, fans will enjoy just having their characters that they loved in the comic books be brought to the big screen in a more kind of one-to-one way, which in this movie, they really did that fan service. And they even had a montage of Deadpool going through the different universes to find different Wolverines, and each universe was a different depiction of a Wolverine from a separate comic book. And for the fans, it was just nice to see that they went from like 2 decades or a decade and a half of not so comic accurate Wolverine to like a 5 minute span where you get like a bunch of comic accurate Wolverines that they don't really kind of dive too deep on, but it's good to just see that they had that in mind and they had the fans in mind when making that montage scene. So that was really fun. The short Wolverine was hilarious. It was probably like one of our favorite scenes in the movie. Between even me and my friends who are not even necessarily comic book fans, they still enjoyed um, those little nods and homages, even if they didn't even fully understand where they were coming from. That's how I know that it was done in like a fun and tasteful way that didn't hinder from the ultimate story. Um, but yeah, I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and then getting into, I guess, the biggest aspect of this movie, which is the cameos. Um, yeah, so I'm gonna like try to like rack my brain to make sure that I cover all the cameos and I don't miss any. But I think the first one that made me be like oh shit, was when they brought back Chris Evans into the fold and had him in I guess obviously a smart and strategic way, posture and kind of through his like sleeves imply that this would be like Captain America, since that's our more recent kind of um iteration, or not. That's the most recent role that Chris Evans has played in the MCU. And then giving us the blue sleeve with the red cuff throws us off as the audience members, trying to kind of get us to expect that it would be Captain America. And the second that he switched and said flame on and turned into the Human Torch from the Fox Fantastic Four X-Men, or the Fox Fantastic Four movies, I literally, like, my jaw dropped. I was like, what the fuck? Everyone in the audience was like screaming and cheering. It kind of felt like back in the day when either like the No Way Home movies came out, or the No Way Home movie came out, or Infinity War, or Endgame, where there's moments where the crowd gets really involved. Deadpool and Wolverine was one of those movies that felt like a cultural experience and an event, especially for the comic book fans. So it was really great to see that. And yeah, there was a lot of like misdirection in this movie that led to great surprises. And I'm glad that I watched it opening night, because immediately people started spoiling it the next day, which, I mean, people have no social media decorum, but I guess to be the first to something is what matters these days. And that's why I kind of wanted to wait a little bit before putting this out, so, to give people a chance to watch it. So by the time I release this would probably be like a week and a half or more since the movie came out. But yeah, I guess so. That was one of my favorite cameos in the movie. And then I think my ultimate favorite cameo, which I guess I kind of foreshadowed with this guy being here, is he's gonna fall. All right, no, he's good. Was having Channing Tatum's Gambit show up in the movie. Man, I literally lost it. Being a fan of not only the movies, but also the drama that happens behind these studios and the castings that ultimately never came to be, allowed for just the ultimate kind of, I keep saying this, fan service, but that's literally what this was. And giving not Channing Tatum a chance to play a role that he was kind of very passionate about and looking to play over the last 10 years and never got the opportunity to, based off of agency discrepancies and just timelines and not being able to kind of work out a schedule that and a narrative fit for the X-Men movies for him to fit in. But although I would have loved to have him play Gambit in previous movies, I think the way it happened here was a way for it to kind of really resonate with the fans and not kind of just blow away in the kind of cultural like zeitgeist of comic book movies. It really allowed for the fans to appreciate him and that character, and Gambit is one of my favorite X-Men. I would say that he is my second favorite. My first favorite being, I don't know if you could see Nightcrawler back there, but yeah, it's a close one. I like Nightcrawler and Gambit are neck and neck for me in terms of my favorite X-Men, but I love them both. I love their personalities, and the personality that Channing Tatum gave to Gambit in this movie was literally so funny, and him doing the full like Cajun accent, and also referring to the fact that he doesn't even know how he got there, considering that other characters in the movie had previous roles in films, and he was probably like the only one who never had a real previous role within the universe or within the Marvel movies. So that was just like a fun nod to that. But getting into the other cameos within the movie, I think in order of my favorites would be Gambit, then having Chris Evans' Human Torch, and then a big one for me where I was like, oh shit, was having Blade show up. And Blade is like the Wesley Snipes version of Blade, which, as referred to in the movie, is currently the only version of Blade because we don't know if or what the situation is with Marvel's new Blade with Mahershala Ali. It just keeps getting delayed and rewritten and in kind of cinematic purgatory at the moment. So they even addressed that fact in the movie as well, which I thought was very funny. But yeah, having him show up was great because Blade's Blade's movies in the 90s were the kind of the first like unofficial step into Marvel superhero movies that as we know them today, even prior to Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. I would say Blade is like that first domino to kind of put all that into play, and to have kind of him be acknowledged in this movie, and also along with other characters from the Fox universes like Elektra and man, who else showed up in that scene? There was Elektra, Blade, Gambit, and oh yeah, of course. And then they had X-23, who was played Wolverine's clone in Logan, played by what's her name? By Daphne Keene. So kind of at every phase of the Fox universe, bringing in a new character from those previous movies and implementing them in this movie with a notable role and working with Deadpool and Wolverine to kind of overcome the big bad. And honestly, I never even heard of this bad guy before. Cassandra Nova being Professor X's like twin sister. I've never heard of that character before, so it wasn't like a whoa kind of big thing for me. But she did a good job, and was a daunting and scary character, but also fit well within the comedic aspects of what the movie was. But yeah, so I really love those cameo appearances, and they did it in a good way to kind of they had it all happen at once, and it allowed for them to not kind of have to rely on more cameos throughout the rest of the movie. They got it off like in big chunks at a time, and then allowed those characters to have a narrative kind of role within the story and give them a proper send off to the Fox characters. And so I guess these are aspects that go into the movie being heavily fan service oriented, and to a person who may not be as versed in kind of the lore of these X-Men and Fox movies, it may not hit as well, I would assume. But for me, it did what it needed to do, and I was happy about it. So it was really exciting, and I think that in the world of kind of what Marvel is doing right now, even acknowledged within the movie, funny enough that it's at a low point, this kind of like brought that original feeling of going to a Marvel movie back, and it was just grand and it was fun. And ultimately, I hope that we see some of these characters again, which I doubt, but it was a good send off for the Fox universe and a good kind of stepping stone into the future of Marvel. But I guess now would be a good time to pivot into other news regarding the Marvel Cinematic Universe and stuff that I'm less happy about. I think that Marvel is in a weird direction right now, not knowing what to do with all their multiverse timelines and characters and stories that just don't seem to be meshing well in the same way that they did leading up to Infinity War and Endgame. It just seemed that it seems to be a bigger mess right now with less cohesive parts and less interest in the fans. And there's less interest within the fans specifically, which means that there's even less interest in the general public to be engaged. I know prior to Infinity War and Endgame and leading up to those two movies, the general public was involved. Like, it was easy to follow. There was a certain finite amount of movies that you could get into to prepare yourself for that movie. But now there's just so many shows and movies that some are relevant, some are irrelevant. And as a fan, I have not even bothered to watch most of the shows that have been coming out. And it seems to be that the fact that I didn't watch them have no bearing on my understanding of what's going on, which means that they're basically not important. And if anything, detracting from the ultimate cinematic story that they're trying to put together. And so one of the big changes that they've made was originally they had Jonathan Majors as Kang to be the next kind of big bad in the universe. And I think Jonathan Majors would have been a good big bad for the Marvel Cinematic Universe as Kang, because he seems like a real threat, and not only within their universe, but to all universes within kind of that storyline. And people were really hyped about it. People were kind of understanding the size and scope of what a character like Kang can do, and was even traveling to the general public of how powerful he is and how he was going to destroy these new Avengers coming through. And a lot of it, it was just a perfect storm of just things going wrong for that to not to happen. Jonathan Majors not only having his allegations and his domestic violence kind of charges, whether a lot of people are arguing about the validity of these accusations and kind of him being accused and then being acquitted on some charges and being kind of, I don't know the word, convicted of other charges. I just personally think that when being in such a role, like having such a pivotal kind of role in such like the biggest cinematic universe, that it's important to kind of understand who you keep around you. And if you're with this girl who elicits these kind of reactions out of you, it would be better to distance yourself from that. But I mean, each person has their own struggles and each person has their own things. But from what I've heard, it seemed that Jonathan Majors had anger issues in the past. I don't know if it came to the point of like domestic violence or whatever, but it seemed like for a person like him, it would have been better to kind of distance yourself from the people who elicit those kind of reactions out of you, and to kind of understand also that there is a role to play of, I believe, race in this situation, that there's people like Ezra Miller in the DC universe who got away with all kinds of crimes and literally kidnapping people and assaulting people, and I think even grooming as well, that although his movie was already been shot and then they released the Flash movie beyond that, it seemed to be like there was less kind of ramifications for him, but ultimately he doesn't get any more future movies as well, so I don't know. But apart from Jonathan Majors' allegations, and kind of his actions off of the screen, I think that Marvel did a really bad job of kind of positioning him as the next big bad, because having him show up in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, he kind of got cracked like fairly easily by a bunch of ants. And then it makes you seem that like, okay, well, how big of a threat is this guy if this is how easily he gets defeated? And I think that similarly in, not to jump universes, but in Zack Snyder's Justice League, where he introduces Darkseid also gets cracked in like the first half of the movie and then like retreats and then has to like then come back and then I guess doesn't even at that point fight anybody after that. So it's like, I think a similar issue happens with Kang and them essentially bringing his character down, which reduces his threat level in the eyes of the viewers. And it didn't go over well with the fans and the audience, and it seemed to be a less viable option to be the next main villain in the Marvel universe. And I think since then they were trying to find a way to get out of it, even though they had already announced that the next Avengers movie was going to be called The Kang Dynasty, and they had this whole plan of fighting all the multiversal Kangs at once, or there'll be like a prime Kang to defeat them all. And they seem to backtrack on that now based off of their most recent news and the fact that they're making this new Avengers movie instead of revolving around Kang, but instead Doctor Doom. And now here's where it gets dicey in terms of my opinions on the situation. I personally love Doctor Doom as a character. I'm more of a DC fan, so I'm less versed in kind of the Marvel lore of these characters. But one thing's for certain is that Doctor Doom is him. Doctor Doom is one of the best villains in all of, I would say, even media, because the comic book media as an art form is very important to the cultural kind of, I keep saying this word zeitgeist. I have no other word to describe it. The world. All right? Just leave me alone. I need to pick up a thesaurus. Anyways, Doctor Doom is like one of the best villains and characters in comics, and has a very nuanced and in-depth and complicated history as a character and as a kind of person within this world. And for those who may not know, Doctor Doom is essentially the leader of a fake country called Latveria in what is supposed to be, I guess, Eastern Europe. And ultimately, to describe him to people who may not know who Doctor Doom is that he's a genius scientist who has an obsession for, I guess, power and control. And he believes that he doesn't believe that, obviously most villains don't think that, but he has a similar belief that, similar to Thanos, that under his control, things will be all right. And for him leading, for him to lead the country of Latveria, the people seem to like him, and he seems to kind of operate with kind of a iron fist, but also it seems to work out for the people that are living there. He seems to be kind of benevolent in that sense, but he doesn't take no shit. And he's a genius scientist, and since he has such a thirst for power, strength at any kind of degree, he's also well versed in mystical powers, to the point where he was considered the role as Sorcerer Supreme, in light of, I guess, Doctor Strange. But if you were to put Doctor Strange as like number one sorcerer, like Doom would be within that realm, up for that mantle as well. So that just kind of goes to show it's like having like an Iron Man level genius intellect with a Doctor Strange level of mystical power combined with kind of the thirst for power, and that's where you get such a crazy character such as Doom. And I think that a character of this degree is worthy of having a fully fleshed out character development, or a kind of, I don't know if development's the right word, but I'm just going to stick with that. But similar to Thanos, where we got bits and pieces of him throughout, and kind of the looming threat of him continued to grow, and the strength of his ability was more justified and understandable to the audience. You didn't have to know who Thanos was in the comic books and to understand his feats to know kind of that, oh no, he's a Avengers level threat. And with their most recent news, as some of people may have heard, is that the casting for this role was in a lot of speculation, considering that it wasn't even confirmed that he was showing up or not, based off of the fact that they had Kang be the face of this, the villain face of this new phase. But they completely just kind of pivoted from having Kang be that new villain to having Doom be the villain. And they most recently announced that the casting for this role, which, just to preface, there was a lot of kind of, I don't know what the word is, but there was a lot of concern with who would be cast for this role, considering that Doctor Doom as a character is of Romani, I guess, descent or ethnicity. And I had to even a couple of years ago when I first found this out, look up what a Romani was. Essentially, these people are like a nomadic people that they believe derived from the Indian subcontinent up into Europe. And I guess the colloquial term for them was being known as like gypsies, but apparently that's a slur, I think, in their eyes, and Romani is, I guess, the correct term. But ultimately, they're not white and they're not necessarily Indian, but they're like a combination of the two based off of their nomadic heritage. But a lot of people wanted, since Doctor Doom is of that descent, for a Romani actor to play him. I think there are a few options that they put on the table, and there are a few actors who could fulfill that role. But I guess you're dealing with the less breadth of actors to choose from for such a high role like that. So, I mean, like, it wouldn't be the first time that they casted someone not of the same race as what they are in the comic books. But yeah, that just seems to be kind of a overarching aspect of that character and the casting that is important to a lot of the fans. But besides from that, a lot of people were looking to have Cillian Murphy play the role. I think he was the most popular fan cast, but they seem to go in a way that I just can't even comprehend why they would do this. But ultimately, they announced that Robert Downey Jr. would be playing Doctor Doom. And of course, Robert Downey was the face of the franchise as Iron Man, which makes it, for me, it's like so much worse, because people said that like Deadpool and Wolverine was a cash grab. This for real is a cash grab. And to the point where there's been kind of word coming out that Robert Downey is going to be making like close to $100 million for his role as Doctor Doom coming up in the next two Avengers movies. And it's like, first of all, where is this money coming from that you couldn't pay the artists and you couldn't pay the VFX people and all the people going into the production of these high level movies, and saying that, oh, them asking for money would be a kind of detriment to like Disney, and that they can't handle even a small minimal raise for individuals, but they're capable of doing this. It just seems to be in poor taste. And it's also on a mere kind of narrative aspect of the story is, what are they planning on doing with Robert Downey as Doctor Doom? Had Robert Downey not played Iron Man and you just brought him in to play this role, I would have been fine with this, since he's a phenomenal actor and he has the range to do so, I believe. But now it just seems to be setting up the fact that it's going to detract from all of who Doom is as a character, and just implement him as a sort of, I guess, I don't know what they're going to do as a variant of Tony Stark Iron Man, or if he's going to be a completely separate character, but just so happen to be Robert Downey. And if they're ever going to acknowledge that, it just seems kind of weird. And I think it really, really puts in jeopardy Robert Downey's kind of legacy in the Marvel universe. Because if this flops, it could almost maybe not undo, but put a real stinker on his role as Iron Man. And it just seems to be like you're going to have the face of the franchise do a complete flip and go from being the hero to the villain in a way that it doesn't even acknowledge the correlation, but like any correlation between the characters. Because there is in the comic books a version of Iron Man that's evil. Gambit also agrees. Damn. Listen, buddy. Just gotta. All right. It kind of detracts from Doom as a character, because now you're just linking him in with Iron Man, your most popular character, which is ultimately their cash grab. Them using Robert Downey as a face, as another cash grab. And I believe that it will cause for them to kind of skim over Doctor Doom as a character and his true origins and his true relation as a rival and villain to the Fantastic Four, and specifically as a enemy of Reed Richards. And that's all people are going to be thinking about in the back of their head, that, oh, that's Robert Downey Jr., that's Robert Downey Jr., that's previously Iron Man. And they're not going to focus on Doom as a character, which is kind of why like Thanos did so well, because you almost didn't even realize that it was Josh Brolin as a character. And even when they brought Josh Brolin as Cable in the separate Fox universe Deadpool, it didn't seem to be kind of overlapping or kind of a negative. And even I think Deadpool even acknowledges it within the movie. But it's just, I mean, I couldn't think of a worse casting that they could have done for this movie. And this is kind of why I feel like the MCU is doomed, in the fact that they're willing to revert to something like this. And even if they completely didn't make him a Tony Stark variant and gave him his own full-fledged Doctor Doom origin, that's all people are going to think about, is that it's Robert Downey, and it kind of detracts from the story. And if you're going to do such a complete different origin, then what's the point of bringing Robert Downey in the first place? It just seems irrelevant, or it just seems illogical. But they are tanking, and I just feel like they're going to breeze past kind of the implications of what a Doctor Doom character can bring to the table. And it's just kind of sad. And there's a lot of people who are hyped for it, and they're like, oh yeah, Iron Man was Doctor Doom in the past in the comic books. And literally it's like a one-off story that has no kind of correlation or canon to anything else. It's just so dumb. I can't even like comprehend it. And I don't know if it's like they're trying to subvert our expectations once again, or like do a whole switcheroo on us. I'm scared. I don't know if it's going to be the case, but to ruin such a like dope character as Doctor Doom in a sense like this is just, I don't know. I have a feeling that they might switch it because there's no way that Kevin Feige will do such a thing, but there is also a way that he will because they've ruined major villains in the past, like Gore the God Butcher and um in Thor Love and Thunder. They completely kind of ruined him as a character and just threw him away. So I don't know. I can't see them maybe doing that the same for this, but I don't know if they're gonna have like another Doom from another universe killed the Robert Downey Doom, but ultimately it just doesn't, I feel like, bode well for the future of what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to be. But I've been talking for a while. I don't even know how long I've been talking for. Let me see. I guess almost an hour. But I just wanted to wrap this episode up with kind of getting a feel for what the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to be looking like and the projects that they're confirmed to be working on that are in quote unquote development. And I'll put it up on the screen right here that their official kind of slate coming up. And I'm just going to run through and give my opinions on these projected films and whether I'm excited or not excited. So based on this graphic that we have here, I'm pretty sure that this is not in potential release order. It just seems to be in, I guess, whatever order that it will be. But first we have Avengers Doomsday, which was previously Avengers Kang Dynasty. You already know how I feel about that. I am very scared for what they're going to do with that and if it's going to be worth watching or if it's going to even hold up to Infinity War. And it seems to be that Doomsday is this phase's Infinity War leading up to Avengers Secret Wars, which is ultimately I think based off of the 2015 Secret Wars storyline in the comic books. There seems to be multiple going back to, I guess, the 80s. And it's a storyline kind of heavily based off of, like, on a smaller level, Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, and Doctor Doom and their rivalry. And then on a more larger scale, the combining of universes into each other and the implications of that. And I guess is maybe Marvel's way of doing a soft reboot of their universe, which I think they're desperately looking for. But it looks like that's going to be beyond that, a kind of slightly different universe from I guess what we're expecting. But it's so confusing. I don't know what the hell they're doing because there's so many like storylines to come up that have to do with the previous universe. So what they're gonna keep, what they're not gonna keep is gonna be so confusing. But it's confusing for a comic book fan and a person involved. So Lord knows what a person who's just a general fan or a casual watcher will have trying to watch these movies. But anyways, so yeah, Secret Wars will probably be like their end game level where like they'll probably do a soft reboot after that. And after multiple universes either collide or get destroyed, but whatever's going on with that. Moving on to Fantastic Four, I saw a leaked trailer of it at San Diego Comic-Con. I mean, I wasn't there, but people leaked it. And it looks interesting. It's going to be based, I think, in the 50s, which now I'm again confused. Will there be a time warp or time traveling where they come back to modern time to join the other Avengers in fighting Doctor Doom? Like what's going to happen there? But one thing I am excited about is that they did tease having Galactus show up. And I'm excited about it, but then I'm also scared because Galactus is also worthy of being a big bad himself. But he seems to be more closely tied to Fantastic Four, so I don't know if they'll use him beyond a Fantastic Four movie and just kind of focus on Doom as being like the Thanos level threat. But I'm excited for it. Originally, I wasn't sure about the casting for it as having, I'm going to try to remember all these characters. So having Pedro Pascal as Mr. Fantastic, which I mean, I personally like, I feel like he can play that role of like a genius scientist who's kind of has a fixation on his career, but also is like a family man. I think he neglects his family in favor of science a lot of times, but I think that that's a role that Pedro Pascal can definitely play, and I'm actually happy with that casting. Vanessa Kirby, I don't know much about her. I think I just seen her once in a film I think she was in a Mission Impossible film, I think the most recent one. And I think she did a good job, and I think visually fits the role and and is a great actor. So I have no problem with that. I love Iban. I think his name is Iban Mas Barak. I hope I didn't butcher his name, but I love him in The Bear, and I feel like he could be a perfect Ben Grimm. And so I'm happy with that casting as well. And I think he can bring a lot of good, also emotional aspects to the story based on the fact that he's basically turning into a monster, but is very, very human underneath. And he has the ability, based off of what I've seen him do in The Bear, to hit those kind of emotional beats as well as bring in a comedic a flair to that role. So I'm very happy with that. And then the one casting that I was very unsure of, but I'm kind of slowly becoming more on board with is man, what's his name? Hold on. Oh, okay, here we go. Here we go. So Joseph Quinn, who shows up as I guess one of his breakout roles was Eddie Munson in Stranger Things. And I really liked him in that show, but I was really expecting, listen, pause, preemptive pause. All right. I was expecting more of a heartthrob level person to play Johnny Storm, considering that's kind of the character that he is. And he's like a playboy and just an overall kind of extroverted, crazy kind of fun guy, which I guess I didn't really see much of Joseph Quinn play that role. And then also seeing him in The New Quiet Place as a more sheepish kind of character more solidified that for me. But seeing him in costume in the trailer and in more recent interviews, I feel like they're gonna, like, he seems to have like a different vibe to him that I feel like, oh, I can see him pulling off Johnny Storm as Human Torch in that role. So I have faith that he will adapt that role fully. So considering all of that, and then considering that Galactus is going to be voiced, he's probably going to be mostly CGI, of course, but they announced the voice actor for him, and this guy is crazy. I forgot his name though. Hold on. I'm going to look him up. Oh, his name is Ralph Ennison. And this guy, man, his voice is literally crazy. He was the voice of, I think, he was the voice of the Green Knight in The Green Knight, and his voice was crazy in that. And man, he has like such a huge, bassy, ominous voice, which is perfect for this role. So I'm very happy about that. So I think ultimately the casting for the Fantastic Four, I'm very excited. I'm very excited for, and I hope they do it justice, and I hope that it kind of bodes well for their kind of transition into Avengers Doomsday. They say that this movie is supposed to come out next July, but they just start this coming July, I guess, since it's August 1st today. I don't know if they're going to be able to successfully complete that, since they've just started filming, and they have to wrap filming and do complete editing in 1 year, which is going to be a tight turnaround for a movie of this scale. So I'm expecting that to have a lot of delays. Spider-Man 4, I have nothing to go off of that, other than the fact that now that Spider-Man is basically forgotten by the world and has to just start over, I like it in the fact that we can get more street level Spider-Man stories, but I do wish that he ultimately gets some kind of familial environment with MJ or Gwen Stacy, or he doesn't have his mom, or I mean not his mom, or his aunt anymore. He has literally nobody. So for him to play off of another character, I'm interested to see what they're going to do with that. Probably introduce Black Cat, something like that, or have him do a street level story with Daredevil. But we'll see. Captain America: Brave New World, that's coming out in a few months, and I'm actually excited for that. There is a lot of controversy with that, especially within um, the pro-Palestinian world, which I am very much a part of. They have casted a former IDF soldier as a role named Sabra in this movie. I think so. The Sabra is an Israeli superhero in the Marvel comic universe, and was named, and that character was created before there was a massacre of that same name. I think it was in Lebanon. Let me just double check that. Yeah, so the Sabra and Shatila massacre that took place, that was mostly between, it says here, Palestinian and Lebanese Shias in the city of Beirut. It seems that it was perpetrated by Lebanese forces, one of the main Christian militias in Lebanon, and supported by the IDF. But ultimately, I feel like I don't know why Marvel would even introduce a character like this, especially at a time like this when they were doing so many reshoots. They could have, I guess, phased this kind of character out. It seems to have no bearing on the role itself, since it looks like this person will be playing like a generic SHIELD agent. It could have been literally anybody else. And so a lot of people are boycotting the movie based off of that fact and them having that character in it. Me personally, I am very happy and not giving them my money. But personally, I do want to see what happens in the movie and see where they take Anthony Mackie's character. And so I will probably just buy a ticket for another movie and sneak into that movie so they don't get my dollars. But we'll still be interested to see what's going on over there in that kind of realm. But fully support anybody not supporting IDF agents in any way, shape, or form. So I support that boycott in that sense. And then what do we have here? We have Shang-Chi 2. Shang-Chi is one of my favorite movies post-Endgame. And so I'm really surprised that it's been taking them so long to give it a sequel. And I don't know how it's going to fold in with everything else, considering that there seems to be no development on that. But I'm excited to see that movie and see where they take it. Wonder Man, I have no kind of, I know him as a character, but don't know much about him at all to have a basis to give an opinion. I don't know how they're going to fit this kind of character into the grand scheme of things, but I have neither excitement nor care for that movie or project. Blade, I don't even want to get started on it. I really love Mahershala Ali, and I really wish that this movie had already came out like 2 years ago. They announced it like 5-6 years ago. At this point, I can't even remember. But that movie is in development purgatory. I don't know what's happening with that. It's been rewritten like a million times, and I don't know why. It's literally a cool guy in sunglasses killing vampires. If you can't get that right, I don't know what the hell you're doing. So I hope that Mahershala is still able to play that role and kind of bring Blade back to life in a sense, and to see his take on it. But I don't know, it's not looking good. What we have here is Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. That's going to be an animated show on Disney Plus. I'm excited for it. I think it'll be fun. I'm not like, they originally slated that to be like as a sort of prequel to the Tom Holland movies, but I don't know if that's still going to be the case, but I think that'll be fun. And I'm going to try to breeze through since I've been talking for a long time. The rest. Thunderbolts is basically Marvel's version of the Suicide Squad. I could literally not give a shit about this movie. It's such a whack lineup of characters. It's just random. It's just, I think they're going to try to lead Captain America Brave New World into that. But I don't know. I have literally no care for the Thunderbolts. Daredevil, I'm excited for. It seems to be a soft reboot. I think they're going to bring, I don't know if it's going to be a continuation of the Netflix series of Daredevil, but it will be Matthew Cox. So that's going to be fun having him reprise that role. And I think he does a great job. Why did I call him Matthew Cox? Fucking Charlie Cox. What the hell? I got mixed him up with Matt Murdock, the real name of Daredevil. But yeah, excited to see Charlie Cox play the role of Daredevil again. So I'm looking forward to that show. I will be tuned in and seated. And based off of, I guess, leaked set photos, they will also be bringing back Punisher, John Bernthal's Punisher. So I'm really excited for that. That's going to be sick. Ironheart, I can literally not care about. I don't know what's going on with that. Like, especially with all this like multiversal stuff. And after like Avengers Doomsday with their Tony Stark, Robert Downey, Doom, Doctor Doom, I don't know what's going on. To link that with Ironheart and then Armor Wars based off of, I guess, God, what's his name? Fucking Rhodey. Yeah, Colonel Rhodes. I would like to see. I would think that Ironheart and Armor Wars could have just been like merged together. I think Armor Wars was originally going to be a show, and now they're making it into a movie. And then Ironheart is going to be a show. I could have seen them kind of merging those two stories, but I like Ironheart as a character, and I want to see her more in the universe. But I feel like having her have her own show might kind of just dilute the character, and her having a more prominent role in Armor Wars probably would have been better service to that character. But Marvel Zombies is an animated show. I really don't give a shit. It could be good, but I'm not like excited for it. Eyes of Wakanda. I don't know if that's so. They have two Wakanda things here: a live action Wakanda series and Eyes of Wakanda. I think Eyes of Wakanda might be animated, and the Wakanda series obviously might be live action. But anything Wakanda based, I'm here for. I love it. I love that world, and I wish that they even previously dove deeper into kind of what that world looked like within Wakanda and kind of the inner workings of how it operates. So I'm very excited for that. What else we got? Agatha All Along. Not only do I not care, I really wish that they wouldn't even make this stupid show. Like, it looks so dumb. I saw the trailer. It's just so relevant, so unnecessary. It's already like, look at everything on this kind of slate right here. It's just taking up space, taking up budget that could have went to something else. I am not interested. What if season 3? What if season 1 was good? I did not watch season 2, so if I did not end up watching season 3, I would not be surprised, but I might tune in. Okoye, I didn't even know that they were gonna have her own show. I would have thought that she would have just let her show within the Wakanda series, but I like Okoye as a character, so I don't mind that, and I'd be tuning into that. Sidewinder, I think that's the role that I don't know how to say his name. Giancarlo Esposito is going to be playing as a villain in Captain America. I think that's his role. I don't know. But the fact that I don't know makes me not that excited. X-Men 97. I don't even care. I'm going to do a whole episode on just that show because I love that show. I'm so excited. That show is literally... That's like a show where there's no other intervention from studios making their BS kind of wants and needs and just allowing it to be a comic book based show and just kind of really diving into that and talking about modern day kind of societal themes, such as genocide and things like that. I think it really highlighted those things well and kind of dove deep into some characters. And man, I love that show. And then Nightcrawler appears in that show and had a crazy scene and sequence. So that really made the whole show for me. So I'm really excited for season 2 and 3. So that's good. And live action Wakanda series, I think that'll be sick. Vision Quest, I think that has to do with the white vision that showed up in WandaVision, which is, I mean, I really don't care. Nova is going to be actually pretty cool. The Nova Corps are similar to the Green Lantern Corps in DC, and they're kind of like the space police. Listen, I'm sure ACAB applies to space police as well, but I think that show might be sick. And then I think the only previous Marvel special presentations were the Werewolf by Night and then the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, but those both slapped, so I'll be excited to see what that is. But yeah, that's kind of my brief run through of what's going on here in the Marvel's future slate. Mostly a couple bangers potentially, but mostly kind of just, I don't know. But that's where we're at right now. I'm going to do a whole another episode on the DC universe, which I'm more of a DC fanboy, to be honest, and see what their future is looking like under James Gunn. But yeah, I think that kind of encapsulates a lot of what I wanted to talk about today. And I look forward to seeing you guys again soon.